Hey everyone, happy Wednesday, August 17th. Again, officially over halfway through the month of August now. It feels weird that I read today that this is the final sunset after 8 p.m. That makes me sad, but also a little bit happy because, we're getting closer and closer now to the start of the NHL season. This hat up here just makes my hair look like it looks ridiculous, to be honest with you. But for today's show, we're going to go over my personal top 5 moments from this past Penguin season, and we're also going to get into the games that I'm really looking forward to this year, like 5 to 10 games somewhere around there to get you all prepped up for the season, and also again look back at some great and also some historic moments from this season. That's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. Not much around the league so far, though we did see former Pittsburgh Penguin Jack Johnson sign with the Chicago Blackhawks on Tuesday night. No, I'm not joking. He is back in the league for another year. Thought he was maybe going to retire, call it a career, walk off into the sunset. Nope, decided he would come back and play at least one more year. Getting around 950K with the Blackhawks. That's just a total tank move by them. Honestly, just a peak tank move by them. I mean, this team that Chicago has assembled, it's going to suck. I almost kind of feel bad for Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane. I think they're likely both going to be traded either some point during the rest of the offseason or by the trade deadline. They don't. For two players that have a lot of pride, that have led that organization to 3 Stanley Cups, I definitely kind of feel bad for them with this, just because, could you imagine Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin on that kind of team? Do you think Sid would have signed off on that kind of rebuild? Probably not. I mean, sure, Chicago, it's probably time for them to do it, but, they probably didn't need to do it this soon if their last management team didn't screw up a lot of moves. And, you want to go learn more about the Blackhawks, go listen to Jack Bushman's show for Locked On Blackhawks. He does a tremendous job. I envy him. Well, I'll retract that. I don't envy him this season because it's going to be a bad year there. But, wanted to start off the show with a little bit of former Penguin news. And yes, the Penguins are still paying Johnson to be off the team. That's going to be happening for the next few years. Now, getting to we're going to start off the show with the top 5 moments from the 2021-2022 season. For number 1 for me, it's got to be opening night. The Lightning, they're coming in, 2-time defending champions. Sure, they may be a little bit hungover from the summer, but whatever. Penguins, they're down Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Sid had COVID at that point. Gino, he was obviously out with the knee injury, but and Jeff Carter, he literally is basically the first line center at that point. Teddy Bluger is, running the show on the second line. Brian Boyle, I think is even running a center spot, and the Penguins just go in there and open up a can of just, what, the saying. It was just a complete dominant performance by the Penguins. Tampa Bay never really stood a chance in that game. And, I remember, Josh Yohe writing an article about this after the game of The Athletic, and he said this was probably one of the top 5 greatest wins, at least definitely regular season-wise, potentially all time in the Mike Sullivan era. And, I'd have to agree with him. That was the kind of game that, the Penguins excel at under Sullivan. They didn't give Tampa Bay any room to breathe. Even John Cooper after the game said, yeah, we got our butts absolutely kicked. When you bring a team in here like Pittsburgh, who, they have a good system in place, have a heck of a coach, even if they're shorthanded, they're still dangerous. And, we pay the price. I mean, that was basically what he said after the game. You had Dominic Simone of all people score in that game. I'm looking up, I'm making sure I have the box score right. And Heinen gets the first goal of the year. Brian Boyle gets his first goal as a Penguin. Teddy Bluger also scores. Evan Rodriguez, and then Brian Rust also gets a goal. And this game, it was never close. It was 2-0 going into the third period. It was 3-0 with less than 6 minutes to go. John Cooper ended up pulling his goalie. Teddy Bluger then scores to make it 4-1. Sure, Alex Killorn scored to make it 4-2 with 3 minutes left, but that was just a garbage time goal at that point. The Penguins defensively were solid as a rock. Jari made some really nice saves, especially in the first period. Even though the Penguins, they came out well, but Tampa Bay, they had some pushes on the way. Pittsburgh really had no business winning that game. And, just a lot of depth players that shine throughout the season, they got their seasons off to a great start in that game. And, it takes a deep forward group to win against that kind of team, especially when you're not playing with two of your three best players. And the Penguins were able to make it look so easy. I know they lost to Tampa Bay. What was it, like a week or two later? Gino was not playing that game. If I recall correctly, I'm not even sure if Sid was playing that game. Actually, no, my mistake. I'm pretty sure Sid missed that game because of the surgery that he had over the offseason. I apologize for that. Now, I know he had COVID throughout the season, during the season, but he was still out with that wrist injury. He ended up coming back a little bit after the season started. And the Penguins, they did what they could. They stayed in that race, or they stayed close enough that they could get back into the race. Because at the time when Sid was out, they were out of the playoff picture. They were down towards the bottom of the Metro, but they stayed within striking distance, 3 points out. And once Sid came back, they were able to, really rise up, even when dealing with other COVID outbreaks and that kind of stuff. So I apologize for that. It was the wrist injury. I almost just blocked it out. To be honest with you guys about that. But for me, that's my top favorite moment of the season. My second favorite moment, Chris Letang capping off Sidney Crosby's 500th goal night. You cannot lose when Sid hits that kind of milestone. 500, only, a select amount of players have ever reached that point for their respective initial careers. It looked like for a while that the Penguins were going to lose that game. It was 4-2 going into the third period. And, all of a sudden, Penguins make it 4-3. Then Chad Weedle, of all people, he ties the game at 4-4. The Penguins game, they go into overtime against the Flyers. And then, of all people, of course, Letang gets the winner against Philadelphia, beats Carter Hart 5 for the Penguins, and all the fans go home happy. It would have been such a. Everyone obviously would have remembered it for Sid's 500th goal despite the loss, but it would have just been such a buzzkill if they lost that game. So on a very special night against the Penguins' most heated rival, against Sid's most hated team, with everything that he said, about the Flyers over the course of his career, that had to end with a win. And, I am so glad that it did. So that's my second favorite moment. The third one was the Penguins-Bruins game when Brad Marchand decided to go, just crazy. That was the game where the Penguins, they actually won another game in Boston. That's only, I believe, the second time they've won in Boston since 2014. They beat them there last year, I'm pretty sure, to actually, end the streak for the first time in 7 years. But, this one, the Penguins, they were down early, a couple goals, and then Danton Heinen's able to lead them back. And then with just a few seconds to go, Brad Marchand, just basically sticks Jari in the face after he said, what, how about that effing save? And that just led to a whole bunch of other nonsense. But, with the way the Penguins were able to come back in that game, just with how, it's just with the Penguins' history at TD Garden, even recent history, it didn't look good. But the Penguins, they started out that game so poorly, were getting badly outshot, badly outchanced, but they were able to come back, take over the game a little bit in the second period, play really well in the third to get that result. That was, I believe, I think it was like a January. Yeah, I believe it was a January game, if I'm not mistaken. And that was just such a fun moment for this team. Number 4, I just had it. Wow. I just had it in my head, but I guess I'm just waiting for it to come back. Sorry. Tristan Jarry's shutout against the Rangers earlier this year. That was that 1-0 game. It was the only regular season game that the Penguins had won against the Rangers, and I did remember the other one that I had. That's going to be at number 5. The only time the Penguins beat the Rangers in the regular season, and that was just a masterful performance, I thought, by Pittsburgh, especially defensively. Jarry made some outstanding saves on the Rangers. It was close to a 50-50 game as you can get. Shesterkin on the other side was great. It was an Evgeny Malkin power play goal that made the difference. Sure, it was maybe a little bit of a phantom call, but you still take the win when you get it. But I thought that was a preview of what was to come in the playoffs, and at times it was. I mean, obviously that was an epic series. Still think the Penguins probably should have won the series if they would have gotten adequate goaltending, but that was still one heck of a moment and a game during the season. Just textbook playoff game early on in the year, well before the playoffs started, and I absolutely loved it. Number 5, the game in Las Vegas. The Penguins go down 3 goals early, and normally against a team like Vegas that is that good with so many high-powered players at the time. They had Pacioretty on the team, Mark Stone, Jack Eichel, Evgeny Dadonov, Riley Smith, all these players, and a couple of them were banged up at the time. Shea Theodore, Alex Pietrangelo, Robin Leonard was in net, and the Penguins, they come out guns a-blazing in the second period, and that's 3-1. Then it's 3-2. Then they finally tie the game, and then later on in the game, they take their first lead, and they're able to win that game. I believe the final score was 5-3. I'm making sure I get this right here. It was 5-3. The Penguins, that was one of their first 3-goal comebacks, I believe, in the last couple of years. And just the way that Pittsburgh was able to take over that game after just a poor start overall. It wasn't even really Tristan Jarry's fault when he was starting that game. Vegas was just all over Pittsburgh. It's obviously a very tough arena to win in just because the fans are always electric there. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. But the will and the perseverance that the Penguins had to come back and win that game, nothing short of spectacular. So those are my top 5 favorite moments / games from the 2021-2022 regular season. Let me know what your top 5 moments are from the season. What do you think I missed or should have been in my top 5? What is in your top 5? Let me know down in the YouTube comments, or you can send me a DM on social media, and all that stuff. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into the top games I'm looking forward to this year, just for one reason or another. But before we get into that, it's time to talk about something pretty serious. It can happen so easily. Say you're out with your friends or coworkers, you're putting back a few drinks, a few become a few too many. It's time to go for a moment. You think you're calling for a ride. Now you're a good driver. You live nearby. You can make it home okay. You just want to drive home. But what are the odds you'll get pulled over? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? You lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride from an Uber, friend, family member, anything like that. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So let's get into the top 5 games I'm really looking forward to this year. I will say one of them on here is a little bit biased because I am going to be there. That's going to be a little later on for my list. But the first one that actually comes to mind is, a couple of these are actually really early in the season. And I'll say this, Penguins, Blue Jackets, it may sound weird to you all, but I'm really hyped for that game. Johnny Gaudreau's first game against the Penguins as a Blue Jacket. This has been not even really a rivalry. It's just been a big brother, little brother series. Excuse me. I feel like Mike Francesa drinking a freaking Coca-Cola while doing a podcast. He used to always do that when he was doing this stuff on New York Sports Radio. This has been, again, just a big brother, little brother thing for the last 8 years. Basically, it's very rare that the Penguins lose to the Blue Jackets. I think, over these last 8 years, they've won the season series every single time. But, I'm really looking, forward to that game. I think the Jackets, I don't think they're there yet as a playoff team, but I do think Gaudreau gets them a bit closer. I think the games are going to be a lot more fun to watch this year just because, Columbus does have more, offensive talent now that Johnny is there. Laine just got a massive deal. If he can put more pieces to his game together, I think, Columbus can be, pretty decent there. I think, Jacob Voracek, if he can score more, I know he's a good playmaker, but, he didn't really score a lot of goals himself. Last year, Zach Werenski's really good. They can get Merzlikins to be, good again. I think this team can make a little bit of noise, but again, I'm not sure if they'll be a playoff team, but I'm really looking forward to that matchup this season. I think it's going to be a really good game. And honestly, the next night after is one of my top 5 games I'm looking forward to as well. Penguins Oilers, Sid, McDavid. What can you say? Both games last year, even though the Penguins lost, they were fun to watch just because, you have to cherish these kind of moments since Sid is not going to be around here, forever. He's 35 at this point. Connor's a lot younger than him right now. There's going to be a time where these two are not going to play together. Every time they go at each other, it's always one of the best matchups of the year. This one I'm sure is going to be no different. I'll be curious to see if the Penguins can get some revenge after they got, kind of dog walked by Edmonton both times last year. That second game, Edmonton came into Pittsburgh and they absolutely crushed them. That was the game where I was really worried about the team going forward. That was, that I even posted an episode saying, I thought they were cooked. Proved me wrong a little bit in the playoffs. It went up 3-1, and obviously, again, with the goaltending situation was bad. But, I thought at that point that they just, they did not have their legs, to say the least. So those are my, 2 of my top 5 games I'm looking forward to. The next one, I got to say, I know I'm a little biased with this, but Pittsburgh-Toronto on November 15th, my birthday. I'm so stoked to be going back to Pittsburgh for that game. This will be the first time I'm at PPG since very late 2019, early 2020. I went with my ex-girlfriend at the time. This was when I just started out the show, too. Had some listeners, not nearly as many as I have today, but just, being able to see, Sid go at Austin Matthews and just, both cores, going up against each other. I think that's just going to be excellent offensive hockey. Both teams play a very high up-tempo pace, and I think it's going to be one of the games of the year, in my opinion. The Penguins usually play Toronto pretty well at home. It's at Toronto where they've struggled in the past, but, I'm really looking forward to that one. Number 4, I got to say it, I think the Winter Classic in Boston. Look, I know watching games actually outside is probably not the greatest because the view is so far away. The players, they actually look like ants when you're trying to watch the game. You almost have to use binoculars or something like that. And I say that just because I've had a couple people go to those games and they've told me that, it's hard to see where the puck is. People have trouble following the puck even at the actual arena. So, but I still, just watching on TV, it's at Fenway Park, one of baseball's most historic stadiums, 2 teams, Pittsburgh, Boston, that do not like each other, being the battle of black and gold. So much high-end talent that's going to be on the ice. I think it's just going to be, a great spectacle. The Winter Classic is always amazing to watch on television. Again, sure, the hockey may not be the greatest just because it's different conditions outside and, fans that go to the game there. It's a bit of a different viewing experience, but man, for TV, I'll always say outdoor hockey is a lot of fun to watch on television. If anyone can hear in the background, my puppy over here is just trying to eat his food bowl, excuse me. So I'm going to have to deal with that after I finish recording this. And then finally, the next game that the last game that I'm really looking forward to here, honestly, I'll say it. It's not going to be another divisional game. Pittsburgh, Colorado. No, the first time they come to Colorado comes to Pittsburgh February. The only time I should say they come to Pittsburgh on this year, February 7th of next year. The 2 games they played last year were really fun. That Penguins game in Denver. I mean, I tweeted at the time, just sign me up for 6 to 7 games of those 2 teams going at it. Thronny, stop eating your food bowl. I'm gonna shout you out on this podcast because you're being a nut. And you're just looking at me. But that game just amazing theater. It's 1-0, 1-1, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. Matheson ties it with less than 5 minutes to go in third period. You think, the Penguins are going to at least steal a point out of this. No, Colorado comes back down 40 seconds later, gets the game winner with only a few minutes left. And that's the game there. The game in Pittsburgh, Penguins and the Avalanche, they're kind of going back and forth a little bit, but the Avs were able to get the better goaltending in that game. And it wasn't for a lack of the Penguins not playing well. I thought they did what they could. It's just Colorado is that good. But I'll never pass up watching Nathan McKinnon and Sidney Crosby go at it. Both cores are so much fun to watch. I think Cale Makar is probably a top 5 player in the sport right now, regardless of position. I call him the next Paul Coffey, to be honest. But it's electric hockey when those 2 teams get together. And for me, those are the top 5 games that I'm most looking forward to this year. What about you all? Do you think I should have put in, maybe some more divisional games, that kind of stuff? Let me know down in the comments and all that. But before I get to the final segment for today's show, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find news, reviews, and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. You can head to the BetOnline today or use your phone to learn more about the trends in action. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow this show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. Just want to spend a few minutes here talking about Mike Sullivan overall. We're entering what is it now? This will be his 8th full season behind the bench in Pittsburgh. And it's crazy to think about that. One of the longest, tenured coaches in the league. Sorry, I was just making sure I had something up here. That's correct. But outside of John Cooper, the longest tenured head coach in the league right now. And I've been thinking about this question in my head lately. How long do you all think he's going to be the coach for this team? I hope it's going to be a while, because again, I think he's arguably the best coach in this franchise history with what he's done with the back-to-back cups, with how he's been able to have this team, prepped and ready for most of the games during the season. Most coaches, they have an expiration date. You look at, before, even like the whole stuff with Joel Quenneville, back in 2010 with Kyle Beach, in Chicago, which was obviously terrible, but still, for this point, I'm talking about, he had his expiration date in Chicago. Mike Babcock, he had his expiration date in Detroit. And then Toronto, someone like Bruce Boudreau, he's at his expiration date in a lot of other places. But, for someone like, even Barry Trotz, Washington, Nashville, the Islanders, one of the 3 best coaches, I think, in the league. And, Bruce Cassidy, same with Boston. He was somehow fired. But, with Mike Sullivan, when is that date coming? Is it at the end of this year if the Penguins don't do any damage in the playoffs? If they're a first-round exit again, if they get in, does that persuade the ownership and the management group to potentially cut bait with, one of the greatest coaches that's ever come in to this organization? I'm honestly thinking right now, with how much Hextall and Burke respect him, that they potentially keep him for another year. But, this is a results-oriented business. So in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, if things do go south at some point during the regular season or in the playoffs, does Mike Sullivan, does he get the axe? And, for those wondering what my opinion is, I've shared it on the show numerous times. I think he's one of the 3 best coaches in the league. I would not I would be very hesitant to fire him, because I think no matter where you look, I think you're going to downgrade at that position. Maybe at some point they could use a new voice, but I mean, it's definitely not right now. The last couple of years, he's just been really screwed by goaltending when it's mattered most. And I brought this point up a lot on the show. It's honestly hilarious how often the Penguins have gotten just royally cucked by goaltending in this Ed and Gino era. They have actually gotten more worse goaltending in the playoffs than they've actually gotten elite goaltending. Yet they've won 3 Stanley Cups off that. It's hilarious. And it's just the big what if scenario, I'm sure, for so many people is, what if they actually got adequate, good goaltending in some of those really peak Sid years like 2012 and 2013 and, and all that stuff. So, it's just, it boggles my mind. But, just getting back to what I was saying overall, I hope that we're not reaching that point yet with Mike. I think he's, again, one of the greatest coaches in the league. He's just a tactical master, I think, at preparing for opponents. When I know a lot of people were concerned about that series against the Rangers because the Penguins had not adjusted to what they were doing. But you give Sullivan time to actually prepare for an opponent, he will do it, and he will do it masterfully. He, even against the Islanders, they outplayed them, I thought, for at least 4 of those 6 games. And you could see that, they had really pushed them. Not even the Bruins, who I thought were a really good team at the time. They didn't really prepare for them as well as the Penguins did. Against Montreal, I thought the Penguins, they were the better team in that series. Carey Price was a difference maker. Matt Murray wasn't that good, but I thought the Penguins, I know they don't sometimes play that well against those kind of trappy-based teams, but, I thought they almost did well enough, to win that series. It's just, Sullivan, he needs to have the right goalie in place to be healthy and putting up the numbers so that his system can, overall effectively work. I think as long as they have him, this team is not going to miss the playoffs. I'm sure you will see people project them to miss this year. I don't really care, to be honest. It's just, people have been waiting for the demise of the Penguins for so long. No, it's whatever to me at this point. But, let me know what you all think. Do you think Sullivan's expiration date is coming? Do you think it could be this year, potentially next year? Just because, again, all coaches have a shelf life. It's very rare when you see a coach just stay with a team for this long. So it's definitely something that I've been thinking about. I don't want him to leave anytime soon, but again, if the Penguins don't start getting at least some results in the playoffs, I don't even know if they have to win the cup this year, but if they can, win a round or 2, he'll definitely be back next year. But if they can't, I think there's going to be some hard questions being asked in the Penguins ownership group in their front office. But that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We really appreciate all of you listening to this one. I'll be back with another show on Friday where we'll talk some other topics relating to your favorite hockey team. So again, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday and a wonderful Thursday, and I'll talk to you all sometime on Friday.